you dropped in. Welcome to the first ever showing of God's on Trial. My name is Marvin Wilson. I'm here with my buddy Billy. The idea for this show was Billy's, and we have a lot of interesting things to cover. But first of all, we wanted to tell you why we're here. What's our mission statement? And Billy has prepared just that for you. What we're all about and what we're going to be doing and what you're going to be participating in.
Well, again, as Marvin said, my name is Billy. Welcome to the show. And just want to let you know a little bit about what's happening here. I started reading the Bible at the age of 12. That was 53 years ago. I began reading it because I had questions about God, and the answers I'd heard to those questions made no sense to me. Questions like, if God is a God of love, how can He place someone He loves in hell and burn them up over and over for all eternity just because they disobeyed Him? How could a God of love allow all of this pain and suffering to happen all around us? Why would God take someone I love away from me through death and put them in heaven to be with Him? These are just a few of the questions that I had, and perhaps you have had these or other questions yourself. Because of the type of childhood I had, I was forced to attend many different Christian denominations. I'm not here to talk about my childhood, although it did put me on a quest that has given me a lifetime of learning. Why is God on trial? Psalms 37:38 tells us that God loves justice. When we think of justice, we usually think of a courtroom, where we find a person accusing another person of a crime. The court has a prosecuting attorney, a defending attorney, a judge, and a jury to decide the guilt or innocence of the person being accused of the crime. In this public court, Satan has accused God of being a liar, stating that God's way of governing is wrong, and that God does not care about us, the human race, His children. So the prosecuting attorney, so to speak, in this case, is Marvin. He'll be asking questions that we all have or have had about God, if there is a God. It is his job to cause doubt in the minds of the jurors about the innocence of God. He will be presenting well thought out questions about God's love and pointing out obvious crimes attributed to God. Again, my name is Billy. I will be, so to speak, the defending attorney. I will be defending God with nothing but His own words found in the Bible. God's way of governing is simple: unselfish love. He gave us humans something that was not given to any other creature on earth: free will. We, like all His children, are like Him, in that we have the right to choose what we do. Satan is one of God's spirit children. In the Garden of Eden, he told Eve, our first mother, that God did not want her to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, because when she did, she would be like God, knowing good and bad. After eating of the fruit, thereby choosing self-love, she and Adam were now like God and, in turn, passed that knowledge on to us. What is that knowledge? Unselfish love is good and selfish love is bad. That action taken by them put the human race into another way of governing called selfish love, or love of self rather than love of others. They chose self over God and over us, their children. Through the course of this trial, I will defend God's unselfish love governing policy, the right to choose. God Himself gave that right to us, and God Himself will not take that right away from us. Now, on to our final and most important character in our courtroom, the judge, and in this case, the jury as well, you. It will be up to you to decide for yourselves the guilt or innocence of God's way of governing. Is God right to give us free will, or should He make us do what He wants? Welcome to the show. We know the topics discussed on this show will be topics that are rarely spoken anywhere in the public, and yet all of us think about these topics. Or perhaps we have filed them away in some distant part of our minds because we got tired of searching for answers that made no sense. Or we just gave in to what we were being taught, and we live our lives with unanswered and unasked questions. God's on trial will at the very least be the most challenging perspective some of you have ever heard. To others, it will be a revelation of something you've known all along, but only after hearing this perspective will it make sense. Then there will be those that think this is a bunch of BS, and they have the right to think what they want, but they will not be able to say that this perspective does not make sense. Sit back and enjoy the revelation. If you have a question or a topic that you would like to discuss on the show, drop us an email or leave a comment below. I don't want people to feel like they're being preached to on this show. Therefore, I will not be looking up too many scriptures. So if you really want an in-depth account of the evidence that I'm presenting in God's defense, I ask you to visit my blog at keepingitscripturallysimple.com. There I will go into great detail in explaining what is happening in the world and why God has allowed it to happen. Please, to all the haters out there, don't be hating. The topics that are to be discussed on this show are from God's perspective, taken from His Word, the Bible. Are they real? That's what you will have to decide. I have cast my vote. Not guilty.
And I'm going to be arguing that there is some guilt here. So there you have it. That's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be putting up shows every Sunday. And just stay tuned, because this first show, we wanted to get our mission statement out there, and we're going to get into the first question that I'm going to pose to Billy very shortly. And you'll be able to, again, the URL for Billy's blog is listed below, and it also pops up during the show, and also our email. So we're very interested in hearing what you have to think as we go through this show where God is on trial. Welcome back. Glad you joined us. God's on trial today. And Billy, I think the first question, and this isn't one of those questions that is rarely talked about, this is actually a common question, especially in today's society, is there a God? I mean, what's the evidence of some supreme being?
Well, going back into my statement in the mission statement, that we are creatures of free will. I can't tell you that there is a God, because that's something that's going to have to be your choice. For me, the evidence is it's like being a crime scene investigator. You can't see the person that did the crime, but you can follow the evidence that leads to the person. So if we take what science tells us all about, that's what's out in the universe, and how everything works together and everything's in harmony, and it is chaotic, but at the same time there is an order to it. So if you follow that on back to the creation of Earth and everything like that we as living beings need, it falls right in line. It continues. There is no interruption. If you go with the evolution theory that everything is something that just happened and it all happened out of chaos and called order, it's kind of conflicting with the evidence, because no order comes out of chaos, normally speaking. So to me, belief in God is the earth is a right distance away from the sun. It rotates at the proper revolutions. It's tilted, so we have 4 seasons. We have the moon Without any of these things, life would not exist. So if you start looking at the overwhelming evidence of order within the universe itself, not even to mention our own human bodies, which is the most complicated thing there is to us. And if you want to put forth the thought that evolution is how we got here, then I ask this question: if evolution is the strongest, the fittest, the strongest survive, and so on, then where did things like love, compassion, understanding, forgiveness, and empathy, where did these things come from? Not to mention the physical being of the human mind. We have a brain that we use 10% of. 90% of our brain we don't use. We use 10% of our DNA. 90% of our DNA is not used. So if evolution is responsible for who we are, why are we not using 100% of our brain and 100% of our DNA?
I think
that's why I believe in God.
I understand what you're saying. There is so much harmony. There is so much. I think it's not impossible that there's no God, no intelligent design, but it's, to my mind, highly improbable. About as probable as, and maybe some of you already heard this, I know we've talked about it, it's akin to the tornado that sweeps through the junkyard and leaves behind a fully assembled, spanking new, waxed, polished, fully functional, bells and whistles Maserati. Is it possible? You can't say it's impossible, but it's highly improbable. So, to me, the concept of an intelligent design, I can go that far. Whether or not I really don't like. I was brought up in the church. Dad was a preacher, a very fundamentalist, hellfire and brimstone kind of ministry, and the image I got of as a kid of the God they're talking about is this wise old long-bearded man sitting on a throne with a quiver full of lightning bolts to send out and smite people when they disobeyed him.
Yep,
and even the concept of a hymn. I can't imagine a God with a penis. What would he need it for? So, is there that kind of a God? I can't go with that.
Well, and neither can I, and neither does the Bible. The Bible says that God is a spirit being. So and just and to use the penis to represent the male species is kind of unfair, because the male is so much more than his penis. And God doesn't need a penis to be our Father, and that's what the Bible calls God. He created us. If you go to Genesis, it says that God created Adam, and Adam is a son of God. God. You have to remember that the Bible always speaks to us about spiritual things in a physical sense, so that we can make the transition between physical to spiritual. That's throughout the whole Bible. And if God didn't do that, God has been so misrepresented by religions, be they Christian or non-Christian. God has been put, just like Marvin said, God has been put on a pedestal as being an evil, manipulative person, that if you don't do what he says for you to do, that he's going to place you in a place of torment, and he's going to burn you up forever and ever. That's how bad he hates you. And yet, he's a God of love.
See, it seems so contradictory.
Exactly.
The messages.
Exactly. And that's exactly what he wants. Mm-hmm. He wants you to blame God for what's going on in the world. He wants you to think that God is cruel and unjust. But God isn't cruel, and God isn't unjust. He's very just. and one day he already knows he's just. But that's what this show is about. It's about looking at God from a whole different perspective. Or should I say, maybe it's about looking at us from God's perspective. That's what this show is going to be about.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. God's on trial, and I've got some questions about this so-called God, if he or it exists. A lot of questions about this, the way things are going on in the world, and how could a God of love allow these things to happen, if there is a God. So that's it for this segment, but keep coming back. Every Sunday we'll be here, and as we grow and gain more readership, we may even be putting shows more often than every Sunday. But come back next Sunday and we'll be here with I'm going to have 2 or 3 really stiff ones for Billy to handle. In the meantime, peace and love and unselfish love. Bye now.